Flawedcast, episode 216. Newsome fiddles while LA burns. He is fiddling while Rome is burning. And unlike the enormous majority of people who do this, fiddling with his face toward the flames. George Orwell.
Flawedcast. Get in the arena.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. All of our esteemed Flawedcast listeners, I want to welcome and thank everybody to a brand new, triggering, hopefully thought-provoking episode. As always, I'm here with my partner in crime, Mr. Carl Tuckerson. Carl, how goes it?
Mr. William, it's a wonderful. I know that the faithful that go back to the beginning of the podcast are going to enjoy this one because this is back to the roots.
Yeah, we're going back into the conspiracy realist territory here, and just something that you and I have been talking about, and I feel like we've had people reach out and ask, why aren't you talking about this? And if you have any idea or any relation to the title, what I'm talking about in that, it probably is not going to be too difficult to pick up what we're putting down. But that being said, we're going to ask you guys, please share. I want to thank everybody that is on Facebook or Instagram, just the different social medias I've been seeing that have been sharing. Thank you so much. Just appreciate and love all you guys. And just for those who haven't, we're asking you to share. And for those who have, we're asking you to continue to share. Now, you can find us anywhere podcasts are. Just search out Flawedcast CLE. We're on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you can find podcasts, just search Flawedcast CLE. We're also on the video platform Rumble. You can search under Flawed Inc. for that. We're on the Project Mockingbird social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Getter, Gab, and Parler. All that is under Flawed Inc. In the description of this episode, there is a link to pick up a copy of my book, Smith's Heart of Man Repair Manual, and our email is flawedinccle@gmail.com. Any questions, comments, or concerns, send them there, and we'll get to them when we can. But that being said, Mr. Tuckerson, it is your time to shine.
Everyone, take your right hand, place it over your left heart, and repeat after us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And before we really get into the meat and potatoes, I gotta tell you, Carl, and I love your feedback real quick before we dive into this. We're a week in now for Trump's inauguration, and I have to say, as skeptical as I've been about him and everything, I am pretty impressed with everything he's done. I'm not happy with executive orders. I still think there's a constitutional crisis with all those, and that's not just him using them, but I do understand that he had to course correct a lot of things. But I mean, he freed the J6ers, which was a huge thing for me, shut down the borders, getting rid of the men and women's sports, all the DEI nonsense, starting to shut down a lot of this wasteful governmental overspending, trying to stop World War III before it escalates any further. I mean, I'm pretty pleased so far.
His actions have produced rapid, positive responses in a week. I'm impressed with the effects. The one thing that I am trying to figure out, he's still being bashed by certain media. It's not as bad as it was the first time. I can tell you that, but He is being bashed. There's something different. I don't know if he is just a quick learner and he looks back on his last presidency at the way he conducted himself in responding to the attacks, or if his spirit has changed. He seems, as hard as this is to believe, much more humble than he was, even when he's answering questions that were set out there as a trap, or they were vicious, or they were attacking him. He seems to me that he is not coming with double barrels blasting. It's like he's showing refrain, and I know it's early, and I'm sure they've probably coached him on this and brought it up to him, but genuinely, I'm almost buying it. There's something different. I don't know if you've noticed.
Well, the one thing I have noticed is the amount of vitriol, the amount of incomprehensible anger from so many people on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, people who I genuinely love, who I look at as family, have lost their minds about things that he is implementing and he is doing, which is honestly, there is nothing that I see that is super radical outside of the excessive use of executive orders, but it's basic middle of the road, common sense things that he's putting in order. And when I see the back and forth, it makes me wonder what is happening. So you're right. I'm cautiously dipping my toe into the water, hoping that his resolve strengthens and that he did learn some lessons and that he is surrounding himself with people. For me, a telltale sign will be how much of the JFK, RFK, and MLK files that will be released that aren't redacted. I think that's going to be a real telltale sign of where he is at and what we can expect. But
I think, and you can correct me because you'll know, isn't even him and past presidents, when they had access to those files and read those files, weren't the files even that they read redacted from its original state to what he was able to get his hands on to get that information? I think it was even a redaction of each president after that. What is the Warren Commission that set out to do the investigating of that? And it was like at that time when the finding came out at the original releasing from the Warren Commission, it was redacted. I don't know who would know the original.
I gotta believe
you know that.
I gotta believe it's deep in the recesses of the CIA's vault where, right next to the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, about that far.
And the only thing I can say about that is I heard Judge Pompeo in an interview, and he was pressing Trump about releasing the unredacted files, the JFK, RFK, and MLK files. At the time, he said, if I released what I saw, it would destroy this country.
Wow.
And I got to be honest.
So he must have seen.
He must.
The
Yeah,
original.
that's my assumption. And I got to be frank. Like I think at this point that might be a unifier more than it would destroy, because I think it's not hard to realize that, whether it be LBJ, the mafia, the Cuban resistance, whatever, I don't think it's going to be so far fetched that we're like, oh yeah, I mean, at least, maybe normies will feel that way.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's a good, thank you. I think that's good. And maybe, during the next couple of years, we will speak on this and check up and take them to the woodshed. Because I think that when things start going awry as a citizen republic, we need to keep our elected officials who represent us, we the people. We need to keep them in check. We need to keep them accountable. That's how our system of governance is designed to work. And if we don't, we fail.
It will almost take something like that event, those events, because there were multiple. I don't know what it's going to take for people to wake up and realize that you cannot trust governments and systems. And if we can release that unredacted to show people this is the capability of the government, of whoever, CIA, even another national ability to infiltrate and look at the result. And if people can see what was capable in the 60s and realize where we are, this might be the one way for people to realize that even the topic matter that we're getting ready to discuss, that, you know what, maybe that's not so far-fetched, because I don't know what to do. I've tried a lot of different approaches, and it just seems like people still want to embrace that what they're being told is what is real. So we'll get into what you have here.
Yeah, and for those who don't understand the idea of the title where I say Newsome fiddles while LA burns, it's a reference to Nero. In July of 64 AD, there was a great fire that enraged Rome for 6 days. It destroyed 70% of the city, leaving half its population homeless. According to well-known expression, Rome's emperor at the time, the decadent and unpopular Nero, fiddled while Rome burned. The expression has a double meaning. Not only did Nero play music while his people suffered, but he was an ineffectual leader at the time of crisis. It's been pretty easy to cast blame on Nero, as he had enemies and is remembered as one of history's most sadistic and cruelest rulers. It says, when the Great Fire broke out, Nero was at his vista in Antinum, some 35 miles from Rome. Though he immediately returned and began relief measures, people still didn't trust him. Some even believe that he had ordered the fire started, especially after he used and cleared by the fire built the Golden Palace and its surrounding pleasure gardens. Nero himself blamed Christians, then an obscure religious sect, for the fire and had only arrested and executed. So I think there's a lot of, if not the symbology, I think there's, a lot of comparisons to be drawn to Gavin Newsom, who many might argue could be in contention for the next one or two presidencies to actually be in that position. I don't think that's a far-fetched idea. The idea that of Rome being a sadistic and ineffectual leader, I certainly can tell you, not just from this incident with the LA fires, through his career that I've seen and I've followed, there is a evil that gives credence to this being. And
you mean Gavin Newsom?
Gavin Newsom,
yeah.
Yes. And I have a 2-minute clip that I'm going to play. This literally occurred 2 days after the fire started. And I'm going to play this. We're going to insert the audio here. And then we're going to come back. We're going to talk about what he talked about, because there's a lot that he mentioned. We haven't done a conspiracy theory episode in a while, and maybe just to refresh, everything that we're going to be discussing is the invisible battle that is going on around us that is unseen. What Gavin Newsom is a agent of this Antichrist globalist system. And I don't say that with hubris. I don't say that with glee. I'm not conflating the issue at all. That's the truth. And after we play this clip, we're going to get into some startling things. I believe there is a direct connection between the fires that happened in Maui, in Hawaii in 2023, the hurricanes that literally just affected the eastern seaboard through Hurricane Helene October, like 3 months ago, that people are still finding their dead. People are still living in tents. People are still eating food out of cans. The complete infrastructure is destroyed. And now we're looking at this other disaster. So I'm going to play this, and we're going to come back, and we're going to discuss.
Over the course of the next several years, Los Angeles will be host to the World Cup, and then the Super Bowl, and then the Olympics. With this rebuilding effort needing to take place, is LA going to be ready for all of those global events?
My humble position, and it's not just being naively optimistic, that only reinforces the imperative moving quickly, doing in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, to his credit, was helpful in getting the Olympics to the United States of America, to get it down here in LA, and we thank him for that. This is an opportunity for him to shine, for this country to shine, for California and this community to shine. The opportunity with all of that and all that opportunity and that pride and spirit that comes from not just hosting those 3 iconic games and venues, but also the opportunity, I think, to rebuild at the same time. And that's why we're already organizing a Marshall Plan. We already have a team looking and reimagining LA 2.0, and we're making sure everyone's included, not just the folks on the coast, people here that were ravaged by this disaster.
You just said you're organizing a Marshall Plan for the rebuilding of California. What is that Marshall Plan?
Tell us about this Marshall Plan. We're just starting to lay out. I mean, we're still fighting these fires. So we're already talking to city leaders. We're already talking to civic leaders. We're already talking to business leaders and nonprofits. We're talking to labor leaders. We're starting to organize how we can put together a collection of individuals on philanthropy for recovery, how we can organize the region, how we can make sure that we are seeking federal assistance for the Olympics more broadly, but also federal assistance for the recovery efforts, and how we can galvanize the community with folks that love this community to really develop a mindset so that at scale we're dealing with the scope of this tragedy and responding to it at scale with efficiency, like the executive order I talked about, time value of delivering projects, addressing building codes, addressing permitting issues, and moving forward to rebuilding and being more resilient.
Okay, so just to kind of get into a couple things, I'm going to be looking at this article. It's called Newsom Sparked Conspiracy Theories by Hinting at Involving a, quote, Marshall Plan to Rebuild LA 2.0. And I'm just going to read it real quick. Democratic California Governor Gavin Newsom has indicated that he will remove some building restrictions for victims of the Los Angeles wildfires, which he said Sunday is part of an effort to push for a Golden State version of the Marshall Plan. Now, have you ever heard of the Marshall Plan?
I have heard of it.
Okay. If you are unfamiliar with the Marshall Plan, in a nutshell, basically what it was is something that Harry Truman signed off on in 1948 as part of a initiative to rebuild war-torn Eastern Europe after World War II and to combat communism. At least that's what the history and documentation tell us. So at the time, it was about $13 billion that the American taxpaying citizenry gave to rebuild the entire eastern front of Europe. And the idea of a plan taking American tax dollars to rebuild another part of the world, or in this case, California, to recreate it in a new image. At the time during World War II, you can use the excuse to combat communism, but I personally believe it was to rebuild that part of the world in a version of America for that whole section. And Gavin Newsom is talking about rebuilding California in his thought process as he is talking to civic leaders, as he's talking to business leaders. He mentions Los Angeles 2.0. And the thing that is startling to me, and I'm glad the guy called him on it, is the property in Los Angeles was one of the most valuable properties in the world, as it was in Hawaii. But if in the next 3 years, California, especially the Los Angeles area, is going to host the World Cup, which is like the big soccer.
And that soccer is bigger than any sport we have around the world.
It's a big deal.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And then the Super Bowl, and then the Olympic Games. These three major events all within 3 years. And I'm going to continue reading just a little bit, and I want to hear your thoughts. I think we're going to kind of meet at the same place. But continuing on this article, Newsom's comments prompted outrage among some on social media, with several sharing near identical messages, writing that his comments, quote, should send chills down the spines of every citizen of Los Angeles. Gavin Newsom sees fires as an opportunity to accelerate his Marshall Plan. This means no single-family zoning, public transit for all, equity/climate/DEI agenda being instilled. We need new leadership, not a new LA. LA isn't perfect, but it's just fine. It's Newsom who's responsible for many of the problems. He's the last person to fix them. And no, he's not using the loss of much of LA as an opportunity, as he did with COVID, to create a new normal. You weren't elected to imagine anything. You were elected to keep us safe, manage our taxes responsibly, educate children. So we're looking here at the re-envisioning of one of the biggest metropolises in America, which never been, by all accounts. It's pretty much an armpit, but it serves a huge purpose. It's a major port system there for us. It's a major social, economical in the Americans and through the world. And not only are there celebrities that live there and movie studios, record companies, so on and so forth, but just average Joe Q public lives and works there too. Before we go any further, I have a couple other things I want to talk about, but what are your thoughts so far, Carl?
I think we can back up to the visual of the sound bit that you played. You played the sound for people to hear, but I watched it live. Watching him speak as though he was somehow, first of all, qualified to rebuild a city that he was responsible for burning made me sick. But then there was a part that clicked in my head also. That was at 18% of your city's fire contained. How can you stand there and be so excited and giddy with human emotion, talking about building something that hasn't even burned itself out yet? And you are responsible for providing the safety to your citizens. Then, as he talked more, he kind of morphed into this evil, weird, like swaying and slithering and giddiness that made me sick. I have never seen someone that was talking about something in the middle of a disaster, literally with people dying because of trying to evade the flames. And he wants to sit there and he wants to talk about how he has been in contact already with Hawaii. That was part of what made me sick, about how they're doing it. And I am sitting here going, you need to hang the phone up on Hawaii and you need to call another fire department somewhere else that has been able to put out fires. Why are you worried about that when you're still burning? So that irritated me and it bugged me. But when he started this like shifting and twitching, and it was almost like his tongue slithering as he was talking, I realized something is not right, Mr. William, with this whole conversation and this whole topic. It sets uneasy with me, and it took me back to when I first heard a gentleman named Dr. Anthony Fauci. I knew nothing about him. I had never read about him. I never researched him. I knew nothing about COVID. All I knew is that when I saw this man talk on television, inside me, my gut started to twitch. My spirit started to get sick. And then come to find out now, looking back, we were right to question Fauci. Yeah. I have the same feeling and the same thoughts about Newsome on this topic.
I think we need to take a step back. I agree with you. I think that in not living there, living here, so not ever having gone to Los Angeles, I can't really tell you, but once again, having a good friend, Con One, shout out to Con. I've been on his podcast. He's been on ours a couple of different times. Good dude. And just talking to him a little bit through this process, and he lives on the other side of the 405. But some of the pictures he has sent me, some of the things he's told me, it's just like, it's hell on earth. And we have to look at this, and I draw the comparison from Maui. I draw the comparison to LA, and I also am drawing the comparison from North Carolina. Now, I will not be persuaded that what happened in North Carolina up the eastern seaboard in October wasn't anything but weather warfare and weather weapons. You can't convince me otherwise. So if you disagree, that's great. That's the wonderful thing about being in America. We can have differences of opinion. I have looked too hard into this and too long, and I understand a couple things. And I've started to compile a list of similarities to Maui, to Los Angeles, and to North Carolina. The number one thing is all three of these areas, very well-to-do. All of North Carolina was a lot more rural. This was just a land grab. At the time, that part of Maui was the second most valuable piece of land in the entire world. Los Angeles, that is the one or two in regards to the land, well, what was the value of the land at that time. And the thing in North Carolina that people don't realize, and this isn't a conspiracy theory, there are so many lithium deposits, natural lithium deposits in North Carolina. It's the largest area in the continental United States where lithium can be harvested. Now, you might think, well, why is that such a big deal? Do you own any electronic items? Well, if so, lithium batteries are running them. We don't have lithium, which right now China has a overwhelming hold on the majority of lithium, i.e. they make majority of the world's electronic, them in Taiwan, that whoever owns that has control over a society, almost by siege, if you will. There are a lot of suspicious items that went on before, during, and as we record this, the fire is still burning. Yeah, it's how this happens. It's now fires in San Diego, which is like 100 some miles away. I'm not saying they're connected. It's just ironic, and you can't blame the Santa Ana winds. This really isn't even the time of year that my understanding is September to November are the times that the Santa Ana winds are the most active. So we're a little outside of that. A couple other things I want to talk about when you talk about suspicious activity is, why weren't any of the fire hydrants tested? Once again, this is something that happened in Maui. Why? Why were the reservoirs of water set aside specifically in Los Angeles to handle these type of things? Why were they all drained 2 months before? And there's other environmental stuff like the smelt fish, which is kind of like a minnow from what I'm a little bit bigger than a minnow. It's not even indigenous to the area. It was transplanted in there. The same thing with eucalyptus. Eucalyptus trees, eucalyptus oil is very valuable, very healthy, very beneficial for a lot of things. However, you cannot trim eucalyptus trees in that area, and they're rampant. And what happens is they produce oil, and it's once again a lot of health benefits, but it's oil, it's combustible. Once again, it's the same thing in Maui. The fire roads weren't cared for. One of the other things that happened is once the fire started, a default thing is to shut all the power off in an area. Both Maui and LA, that did not occur. I mean, this is firefighting 101. This is stuff that I know as a complete layperson. But the leadership, the DEI leadership, who one of the fire chiefs said...
Show you this clip from the LA Deputy Fire Chief. Now, this is Christine Larson, whose job with the LA Fire Brigade is Equity and Human Resources boss. Have a listen to her and ask yourself... any wonder they've got problems with fires in LA and rescuing people. Have a listen to this.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
I don't know if you heard that.
It was a lesbian.
Well,
and
yeah.
She was overweight. And
she's like my size.
She couldn't really, not physical. So
number 3, targets were destroyed in high value areas and high value resources. Once again, we're talking about the land in Maui. We're talking about this land in North Carolina that was rich in lithium deposits. We're talking about Los Angeles here by Palisades, where these major events, the World Cup, the Super Bowl, the Olympic, we just look at this stuff that's going on. They were limited or confusing evacuation and warning systems. I know in Maui, they were literally, the police were stopping people from evacuating. Like, you can't go down this dirt road and get out of here and escape the fire. Very similar things are now being reported from LA, and certainly in North Carolina, we read all kinds of interferences with people trying to help in recovery, people trying to help with rescuing, and the gross misuse of not just public funds, but public items, like all the protective gear for firefighters were given to the Ukraine soldiers. We saw that FEMA was depleted, so in North Carolina, they were unable to access those funds. I think between North Carolina and Los Angeles, they were giving people $750 in relief. These things are occurring, and we need to start asking ourselves why. Just a couple other things I want to touch on in this portion here, but post-distant response and development concerns. The development concerns are in Maui cultivating that land for whatever purposes. Now, I'm going to get into what I think that is. Same thing with LA. Obviously, North Carolina, it's already set up to mine. They're building mining roads, and unbeknownst to them, and they're going to just be mining that lithium. But I don't rule out also the idea of terrorism, the potential of terrorism with these fires, or the fact that they were so improperly handled that you almost can call it like governmental terrorism in a way.
It's not stupidity.
It's purposeful. Because
no matter how stupid you think positions of power have become now with these people, they were warned. They were warned. Right. People warned them in advance. Not only did President Trump in his first presidency, and I could understand, they're not going to listen to him, right? It's like, who are you? Whatever. You're an entertainer. You're a real estate guy. But they were warned by fire officials. Now, when you realize that you don't have to be the guy, you just have to know the guy. See, I'm old enough now to realize that. I don't have to be the guy. If I know the guy and him and I are tight, it's just as good for me. So take the advice of the people that are qualified. They were made aware. So now you do have to ask yourself the question. If it wasn't just because he's a moron or she's a moron, then why? There's the rub. there's the question, because we're living in a time where this country is so ready to swallow propaganda. Can I give you an example?
Please.
A little over a week ago, our president makes an announcement about Stargate. He's going to hook up with OpenAI and Altman. He's going to be with Oracle and Larry Ellison. He's going to be with the Japanese bank that's going to loan $200 billion of the money for this great program that, I'm sure he believes, because everything is going AI and it's like the old space race. We got to lead to get there, right?
Right.
So he announces a $500 to $600 billion company put together with Stargate, the most brightest people coming together collaboratively so that America can lead in AI, artificial intelligence. Okay. 5 days later, you have a Chinese AI company called DeepSeek that makes an announcement that they are able at $6.2 million to achieve the same thing that Stargate did at 1/10 of the chips and electronics, and it's equally as good. And when DeepSeek made that announcement, the word came out, and just because they said that, and that company existed, and that company does have AI, this country decided to freak out. Because we're so gullible to believe anything. We want to swallow propaganda. We want to be lied to. We want to believe deception. So NVIDIA dropped 16%. You have Chat GPT that dropped. What you have is you had these big tech global companies, and in an announcement coming from China of what they were going to do and what they've already achieved, this country was so ready to believe that it literally took billions of dollars out of the stock market. And you say, okay, Carl, so what's the rub? Let me get to the rub. Do you know anything about DeepSeek? I didn't, but I decided to research. Guess who owns DeepSeek? High Reacher. What's the High Reacher? It's a hedge fund of the Chinese government. Guess who is the owner of DeepSeek? It's the CEO of the High Flyer hedge fund company. So we have the leading nation at this time in propaganda, using the media, using propaganda to just make that statement, and knowing that Gigi Ching is the one that really is running High Flyer, because anything in China that gets big is government controlled. I don't care who you put there as the CEO. I don't care. It's Gigi Ching's money.
It's just a shill.
It's a shill.
It's a puppet.
So then they take the guy that I'm sure sits right on the right side of Gigi Ching, and they put a company together, and it's been in existence since 2023. And this country wants to be propagated. They want to believe a lie. See, I cannot see this any other way. I have tried to think, like, how is that possible? But when you are so willing to believe what you're told, no matter who says it, no matter what's real, I'm sorry, you want to be propagated.
Well, do you remember just a handful of years ago, the Biden administration announced a $42 billion plan to get internet all throughout America? There has literally been no results from that, but $42 billion missing of taxpayer funds.
Yeah, it hasn't helped me any.
And Elon Musk, you think of him what you will, can do that for, what do you say, $2 billion, and everybody in America.
He did it in L.A.
And he did it in North Carolina.
He gave North Carolina, he gave L.A. internet.
Exactly. So I personally don't believe there's anything the private sector can do that isn't more cost effective, that will get done better and more efficiently than with the government. But I want us to start looking. I think you're bringing a valid point. And why does this matter on a spiritual level? Mm-hmm. This is the whole crux of this podcast. We are making war against the powers and principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places, just as you're describing.
Yep.
And I personally believe when you look at Maui, when you look at Los Angeles, I can attest personally with my Aunt Barb, who I keep saying I got to have her on the show, but she was part of something called Project 912, which was a initiative that was put together after September 11th. It was in conjunction with the Tea Party, and she actually ended up being targeted under the Obama administration with the IRS and so on and so forth. But the idea of Agenda 2030, the idea of what we're going to be ready talking about is 15-minute cities. Have you heard this term before?
I have.
Okay. So this is something that a lot of people are choosing to purposely ignore the horrendous, the literal tyrannical control that these are going to have. And Maui, before the fires happened, everybody who owned land there was approached by a company, which is a government shield, to sell their land, their ancestral land, their tribal land, because they want to start building 15-minute cities. Now, if you've not heard that terminology, if that is new to you, let me just explain a little bit about what a 15-minute city is. This is a 15-minute city is a urban plan concept in which most daily necessities and services such as work, shopping, education, healthcare, and leisure can be easily reached by a 15-minute walk, bike ride, or public transit ride from any point in the city. The approach aims to reduce car dependency, promote healthy and sustainable living, and improve well-being and quality of life for city dwellers. Mm-hmm. When you and I got another article I want to read, but when you hear terms like reduce car dependency, promote healthy and sustainable living, improve well-being, when you hear terms like that, your spidey sense needs to go off. Here's another article, and this is from an ABC affiliate from Australia, and this was written 2 years ago. It says, "What is the 15-minute city?" There are two different kinds of views for 15-minute city idea. To some, it's an urban planning concept that promotes sustainable and healthy living. To a small group of others, it's a plot by tyrannical bureaucrats to take our cars and control our lives, which could lead to real-life Hunger Games scenario. After outlandish claims about lizard people, 5G, and COVID-19 vaccines, conspiracy theorists are now targeting the world of urban planning with protests against 15-minute cities concept springing up around the globe. One of the things that I really want to help people with is to read something like this and pick out the bull crap. Mm-hmm. And when you hear something that we're disproving because they believe in lizard people, or 5G, or the COVID vaccines, well, I'm sorry, I don't brag much in this regard, but this podcast was on the forefront of fighting the death vaccines for years now.
Yeah.
And 5G is a verified killer.
Yeah.
It increases.
It's also unnecessary.
It is.
To do what they say it does.
Absolutely.
It's not even being used for what they say, but
absolutely,
that's another podcast.
So exactly. So the idea of 15-minute cities is this. You're going to be gathered into areas, and within 15 minutes of either walking or riding your bike, any and everything you need will be there. Now, that sounds great. That sounds super convenient. For someone like me who is unable to drive, there's a lot of benefit to that. If I want to go to the store, if I want to go to the movie, if I want to go, here, I can just literally walk there. You're taking care of the earth, you're, healthy living, sustainability. But here's the thing, you're losing your freedom. When it says a Hunger Games scenario, that's exactly what it is. Hunger Games was based upon
the capital city, baby.
The 13 different territories.
Right. Put the people in 13 spots.
Exactly.
And there they stay.
Exactly. And here's the thing. A lot of the executive orders Trump released have kind of combated this, especially in California. They're going against engines, anything that runs on gas, anything that isn't based on dinosaur bone juice. They're doing their best. They're getting rid of it. Is ultimately where we're going. Now, how is that a spiritual thing? Well, it's a spiritual thing because when people deny this, I will not be a part of that. What happens is you forfeit your rights. You literally are succumbing to putting yourself under lock and key of a governmental system that is not only determining where you can live, but it's determining what is within a certain distance. Who are the physicians that you can go see? Where are the banks that you can go? It's all going to be CBDC in your future future anyway. It's going to literally be controlling of what grocery store you can go to, what products are in that grocery store. How are you going to manage your time? Where are you going to be employed at? Because if you have a job, can only walk in 15 minutes, you're going to be limited by what you can cram into in that little space, in that little area. So you're literally handing over control of every aspect of your life, which is what the Antichrist globalist system is in the process of doing. After listening to Newsome, I see no other course of action as to this is what he's trying to do. The idea of using a Marshall Plan for California to rebuild it in his leaders and whomever else he's talking to or talking about, and their image is a postmodern Marshall Plan that I have no other course of belief other than this is evil at its core. It is meant to bind and fetter humanity, and this is where they make their move.
Yeah, the thing that I want everyone that is still with us to...
well, it's far-fetched. I get it.
I don't see it as far-fetched at all. I mean,
well,
basically, you've read articles. We've played sound bites. We have went back in recent history and spoke of things that happened. I don't see how anyone, and, if there's anyone that's listening that thinks that it's far-fetched, I would love a phone call. I would love if they can call the voicemail and leave a message and I can call them back. I will talk to them. I'm making a I have never done this before statement. I will talk to you. And see, I'm not one of those guys that isn't able to change what I think. But hear me now. What I think is based on what I know. So it's not so easy for my opinion to sway, because I don't shape an opinion until I've spent hundreds of hours researching and studying something. So once I form an opinion, that opinion really isn't what I think, it's what I know. So that's why I'm open to the phone call, because I wouldn't get on a podcast and speak into a mic if I didn't know what I was saying was true. Because how many times have I told you it doesn't matter what I think? It's irrelevant. I don't even trust my opinion. That's why I refrain until I know. And then I base, if I have to have a thought, it's off of knowledge, not emotion. So that's the point I'm at, especially at this age and with what's happening. I'm done with the pretending friendship type stuff. Like, that's done. If you want to be in the circle, step in. If you want out, step out. That's where I am with it, because I just don't have time to watch Facebook, to read Facebook, and to look at the people that make the comments back and forth and back. I'm like, I've got out of that phase of my life.
Wisely.
Right? I just don't care. I'm not going to just flippantly share for everyone to read how I feel. I'm sorry, but how I feel is generally too personal for me to put out there for everybody to read, because how I feel is valuable. How I feel has meaning. It's not cheap. I don't just throw things out there because it's too valuable. I keep it inside, and then I take it to God. And then only those that are closest to me are going to know how I feel. Society isn't going to know. I'm not going to say they're not worth knowing what I know, but what I feel and what I'm going through and the struggles I'm in, I don't need the sympathy. I don't need that. I'm at a different place. I've went through that. So, said all that to say this. If someone literally thinks that one word that has been read, quoted, played as a soundbite, or anything else that was said, even in reference to High Flyer and Deep Seek and Stargate and whatever, that's not my opinion. That's flat out fact. Everything you've said is flat out fact. If you want to be a resident of a 15-minute city, imagine when you were a child, literally an 8-year-old, And your daddy told you to not go farther than that big sycamore tree that's 2,000 feet down the road because it's not safe for you to go any farther. And if you do, daddy is going to come after you and daddy is going to discipline you. And if you want to feel like an 8-year-old and you want to have a limitation to where you can go, what you can eat because mommy made the SpaghettiOs and it doesn't matter that you like peanut butter and jelly. If that's the life you want, baby, go live it. I'm not living that life. And so I guess someone might have a problem with the way that I view the 15-minute city. But what I'm saying right now is not my opinion. The article just said that is what is going to happen. Am I correct?
You're 100% correct. I chose this article because it was the smallest.
Yeah. There's pamphlets on this stuff, books, pages.
15minutecity.org.
Yeah.
There's and not only is this a quote unquote American problem, this is a global problem. So when I make a statement like the Antichrist globalist system that is coming to advance the kingdom of darkness is literally having a scorched earth policy in front of us instead of looking at what is behind these things. And this is not to minimize the tragedy. I mean, last I saw, there was over 7,000 acres of the most valuable property in America destroyed.
Do you mean directly in the LA area?
Yeah, dozens of people have died that they know about.
Yeah.
We go back to Maui. It's the similar thing. They still haven't been able to rebuild. And not that they're going to because it's a land grab.
In North Carolina, they still haven't found bodies. There's people that are just missing, family members that are just gone and may never be found.
And all these people are going to be dislocated. They're going to be moved. And the other thing I want to just kind of come back around and talk about is the fire insurance was canceled from every homeowner in this area, much like it was in Maui, 2 months before this happened. So what that means is if you're not a mega super rich person, you're SOL. If you or I lived there, we would have no choice but to literally take what we could grab in our house is if we could evacuate.
And take whatever penance they're willing to give you for your acreage, for your 1 acre lot, you know?
Exactly. And once again, these articles, it's like throwing a pebble into a pond and seeing the ripple effect. You do the deep dive. You do the research. You look for yourself. I can't convince you. But the matter of the fact is that maybe with Trump, things could get steered around. Personally, I don't believe so because when you're looking at the fact that tens of thousands of American citizens from Hawaii to LA to North Carolina have died. Once again, I think North Carolina, the hurricanes were created by our government. I think we had an episode about it. Go back and listen to it. But where we are at now, we saw that when Trump was in office from 2017 to 2020, all hell literally came loose against him and this country. We cannot be naive to think that it won't intensify. It won't get nastier. It won't get more personal. And it's not an attack on him. It's not an attack on you or I, or even if you're listening to this. What it is an attack if you are filled with the Spirit of God. If Jesus Christ walks with you, you are in the crosshair of this system of governance that is doing nothing but crushing the human spirit, manipulating and destroying innocence, and trying to establish the kingdom of darkness against the kingdom of light. That's all that it is. And I know that sounds epic. It sounds whatever, but I would rather tell you the truth based on what my spirit is telling me, what I feel like the word of God says, and what I also just look and I just study like you, Carl. The information is there.
Yeah.
They're putting this in front of us because it's the Luciferic principle that they can get away with whatever they want to. And you accept it because you don't fight back.
It's that same spirit of delusion as we've done the podcast in the past.
Absolutely.
That the great delusion will come upon the earth and a great falling away will take place. And we covered that in a podcast.
Several.
Yes, it's the same spirit that the devil used to pull away a third of all angels. It's the same spirit he was under when he looked at God's throne and said, I can do better than him, and I'll look better sitting on the throne. I'm more powerful. That same spirit of delusion is what these people have tapped into when Gavin Newsome has the guts and audacity as his city burns to sit there and start that wiggling, that evilness and giddiness of almost like rubbing his hands together and licking his lips. That's delusion. That's pride. That's arrogance. That's haughtiness. That's cockiness. And that's demonic. And those are your city officials, your government officials, national officials, world officials that sit in the seat of ruleship and beat us over the brow with their prideful, cocky, arrogant, you don't need to fly on a plane because you're destroying the ozone, but we will gather in our private jets in awe of us, and thousands of jets at one time will fly, but we can do that, but you can't because we love the environment. They don't love anything.
Gavin Newsom was guilty of having was like a 20, 30 person party at some closed restaurant
video
during COVID. Nobody
is
is wearing masks, but literally the entire city of Los Angeles was, people were dying.
Yeah.
People couldn't go, and if they were safe to roam the street with all the vagrancy and the chicanery going on, they literally couldn't leave because they were under a quote unquote martial law scenario
and had curfews.
So to back up what you're saying, you're 100% right. We have a short term memory.
Yeah, we do.
And we
want to be propagated. We want to be lied to. We want to be deceived as a country.
We're talking about Nero. We're talking about the Roman Empire. The idea of bread and circus was introduced then.
Yeah.
Give people a small penance of bread.
That's right.
And entertain them so they're not able to think for themselves. They have cogitative, clear, concise debate with these things. So at the end of the day, I think you can believe what you want. You could do a deep dive like we have. And once again, the only thing that stopped me with these articles is that they were shorter.
Yeah.
There is multitudes. Talk to people. Like I said, my Aunt Barb has, and if you don't think this is happening in your neighborhood, if you don't think this is happening around you, or these plans aren't trying to be put in place, you're dead wrong. If you're thinking this is only happening in LA or these big, Asheville, North Carolina, or in Maui, Hawaii, you're dead wrong. And once again, I have the firsthand testimony of my Aunt Barb, who was part of the Jaga Ashtabula in Lake County 912 group, who literally had meetings with these individuals coming in our area to try to do a land grab through duplicitous means and try to begin to reconstitute the lay of the land, where they were trying to steal the land from farmers and control what they could farm, how many chickens they could have, how many cows they could have, when they were able to harvest, whether it be the eggs or whatever it was. This is a absolute control. This is an absolute abomination on the Spirit of God that has been put inside of us. And do you have any closing comments?
No, I think you did a tremendous job, and I threw in my 2 cents.
Well,
so I think we're good.
All right. Well, I'm just going to pray us out. And Lord, just thank you for this episode. Thank you for everyone listening. If they are still listening with us, I ask right now that the Spirit that raised Christ from the dead, that within the person listening, that you electrify them, that you open up their eyes, God, that you open their spirit, that the spirit of wisdom and revelation would come upon them, and then that you would equip them and you would give them a excitement to stand boldly in defiance of this evil that is trying to encroach on us. And Lord, I just thank you for those who are listening, who have a spine, who have a backbone, who are filled with your Spirit, and who are ready to take place on the wall and say, not on my watch. And Lord, I just ask and pray that you would count us as worthy to be counted among that great host of people that are on your side. And we just love you. We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So this was a great triggering episode.
Yeah, you did well. I mean, I really thought after you introducing it and you had used the term conspiracy type podcast, it really wasn't. Not at all.
I mean,
again, factual, propped up with soundbite, propped up with your articles, where we let the people explain it themselves because they're so arrogant. But Yeah, it wasn't conspiracy. I'm a little let down because I thought you were going to have something really way out there.
Lizard people. Well, we talked about the lizard people in that one article,
Yeah,
so.
maybe we'll do a whole podcast.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. But listen, I want to encourage everybody. There's a ministry that decided that we're going to partner with and that we're going to help with the Restore Addiction Recovery. The website is www.restoreaddictionrecovery.com. The intake phone number is 234-571-9503. CJ Marcano, who is on the podcast, it works for them, and I'm just so touched by what he shared, and that is going to be in an upcoming episode. But addiction and recovering from that is real, and the only thing that will allow people to do that is Christ. So I want to be able to highlight this organization. So once again, restoreaddictionrecovery.com. Phone number is 234-571-9503. Tell them CJ sent you. But we just want to, once again, love you guys. Thank you for listening. Make sure you share. That's the only thing that we're asking you to share this episode. You can find us anywhere podcasts are. Search Flawedcast CLE. We're on Apple, Spotify. Once again, anywhere podcasts are, just search Flawedcast CLE. We're on the video platform Rumble. Search under Flawed Inc. We are on the Project Mockingbird social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Getter, Gab, and Parler, all under Flawed Inc. In the description below, there's a link to get a copy of my book, Smith's Heart and Man Repair Manual, and our email is flawedinccle@gmail.com. Send your message to Carl to have that phone call with him, and we'll make sure we get that arranged.
I really can't wait.
I can't either. I hope some of you take him up on it, because I talk to this guy pretty regularly, and I always get some out of it when we chat. So, but that being said, stay frosty.